5 minutes on the clock today, I want to talk about a webinar that we just produced with Karlie Morien over at Logixboard. Bit of a recap, bit of a big takeaway kind of situation, if you will. We talked with Karlie about team meeting types, how to effectively run a team meeting and how to get people to actually buy in and care about it as a manager, something that a lot of individual managers are struggling with nowadays as the hybrid, remote, on-site work environment shifts back and forth. Would love to grab a big takeaway of yours from the conversation and see what you learned from Karlie.
Yeah, for sure. One of the first things I want to talk about is the I don't know, talking about internal meetings with your manager. I just get these flashbacks of, and not in a bad way necessarily, but just like me as an SDR, my manager being like, anything you want to talk about during our one-on-one this week? No? All right, we can cancel it. That's fine.
That's cool. That's fine.
And when you're the SDR, you're like, all right, great, more time to make calls. Like, I didn't have anything to talk about. I don't really care. But as a manager, I feel like my manager should have cared a little more. He was relatively new in the role. I think he cares more now. But it's something that, like, on the surface, it can feel like you're doing a good thing. Like, oh, I don't need to waste their time. But coming up with a reason to have the meeting, like a genuine reason, is always going to be better than skipping it because there's nothing going on. It can be anything. You could talk about what they want to do with their career. You could talk about how their life is going. It could take 10 minutes instead of 30. Like, you can make all kinds of adjustments you want. And this leads me to the point, the major takeaway I got from it, which was really about catering the meetings to the people that are having them. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that can get lost. Obviously, with the larger team, it can get more difficult, but being able to know your reps and learning through the one-on-ones how they like to meet is a great way to then take those strategies and put them into larger team meetings. So if you have a rep that doesn't like to just shoot the shit and talk the breeze for 15 minutes before a call, and you have another rep that does, those are two different scenarios, and you should run those one-on-one meetings very differently and then find some sort of compromise when you bring them together. So that was my major takeaway. Did you have anything different or anything to add on to that one?
Yeah, just to add on to yours real quick and then go into mine. There's like the running joke, comic, whatever, that like, oh, this meeting could have been an email. I think in a lot of cases, that's the thing people want to avoid, right? Is having a meeting that could be an email. So that's why oftentimes a manager might default to just not having one instead, because they feel like, I can sum up a couple of things in an email, shoot it out, and that's that. But you're right. I think like keeping the consistency and structure of having a one-on-one meeting every week at the same time or whatever you end up picking is good. It just overall for like the health of the manager and rep relationship to know that like that's time that you have each week to do whatever you need to do, whether it's talk about my career, whether it's talk about my pipeline, whether it's talk about a specific scenario that I'm having trouble with. Like knowing that that's there is almost like a safety net for reps that managers might not have the full, like not capacity to understand, but just a different point of view that doesn't allow them to understand that. My big takeaway, kind of piggybacking off of yours, was that like you can have all of these one-on-one meetings, you can have all of these team meetings, they can be about whatever, but at the end of the day, documentation is a huge component of making sure that each meeting has value and that they kind of build off of one another. A lot of times you can come out of a one-on-one meeting or a team meeting and have like a lot of very good points that you thought you've made, that your manager made, like next steps for my career development or how to tackle this pipeline. And then you forget. It's inevitable. People forget stuff. Your manager might have another one-on-one that they're about to hop into, or they could have a big pipeline review with the CRO and they just kind of gloss over some of the details from your meeting and forget to follow up, or you're hopping on calls and you forget to do the thing you said you were going to do. Just having a very basic document that you can reference each meeting, going into it with your reps, taking notes and making sure that you have like a concrete place where people can go back to and see, what did we talk about? What were the next steps? Just something to look at can help a ton. And it's a very easy step to overlook. A lot of managers will rely just on remembering something or kind of hoping that like, hey, Alex, we talked about this thing, go and do it, and just like expecting you to do it. There's a level of autonomy that you're giving your reps by like kind of sending them off and having them do the thing that you talked about that is aided by just having a piece of paper they can go back to and look at. And Karlie actually provided a pretty good template during the webinar that we'll share for you just to use as a basic form to jot everything down and make sure that you're actually doing the stuff that you talked about, that you can build on the next meeting to make sure that you touch on the stuff that you had previously talked about, the whole kit and caboodle. So that it's just like, it's easy, but it's also really easy to overlook.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
that was my big takeaway.
Yeah, and I think the other huge piece of documentation and taking notes and recognizing next steps and being able to action them is the fact that I feel like a lot of one-on-ones, like you said, a lot of good ideas come out, a lot of conversations happen. Not every idea or conversation leads to that next step.
True.
And then additionally, sometimes you'll be like, yeah, I can do that this week. And then you leave the meeting and you're like, wait, how am I supposed to do that? It sounded like a really good idea, but something's missing here, right? And if you don't write that down, you're going to leave the meeting, go to your desk, start calling people, and just forget about it for 4 days. And then it's 4 hours before your one-on-one for the next week, and you're like, oh shit, how do I do this? And then that sets up a bad mindset for that one-on-one. It can spiral from there if you're not careful. Things like that can happen. So the documentation is definitely a huge part of successful meetings, especially if they're recurring. All right, AJ, 15 seconds. Tell everybody about opt-in.
Opt-in, quick 5-ish minute videos, actionable sales development tips, minimal fluff. You can find us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on our Instagram, and on the website, demanddrive.com.
Yeah, you could have got my Coach Steve impression. We'll just have to let the world think, does he even know what a Coach Steve impression looks like? We'll find out.
Do people know who Coach Steve is?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.